Hello everyone, and welcome to our session about visual regression testing with BackstopJS. It's all nice seeing you here. My name is Ivo. I have been working with Drupal now over 10 years. I am a co-founder of Phenomen, which was a Drupal company that we co-founded with our partner Ryan already 10 years ago. So we have been developing on Drupal platforms since version 5, version 6, and version 7. And a couple of years back, Phenomen was merged with ADM Interactive. So now our team, our Drupal team, is one part of ADM. And with me is also Meelis, who is one of our senior Drupal developers, has also been working extensively with Drupal now for several years. Briefly, before we get to the backstop, a little background also about ADM. ADM has been in the Estonian market for quite a long time, for over 20 years. It's one of the largest digital agencies in Estonia at the moment. And we have over 100 different specialists. We have several different teams or departments, as you wish, doing a lot of different things. We have our Drupal department with over 20 people that focuses on Drupal mainly, but also on other PHP platforms like Laravel, for example. We have our integrations team that their core competence or technology is Java and Java backend development. We have our own hosting department that provides customized hosting services and solution on cloud platforms, namely AWS and Google. We have our own media team, and we even have our own startup accelerator program, which is called Elevator Startups. So if you have some cool business idea, you can find out more about Elevator Startups as well. So in all, we develop in a lot of different platforms. We are working daily with PHP, with platforms like Drupal and Laravel. We use different content management systems, again, and Drupal, as well as WordPress, and also embrace different other technologies as well. And our offices are located right here in Kultuurikatel, and all this lobby area that you are walking around, this is actually our space, our daily space where our people take coffee, play ping pong, and so on. And if you happen to be in the sixth floor tower, this is one of our spaces or rooms as well. And so let's get to the topic about BackstopJS. So we try to study, investigate, and try out different tools and technologies from time to time. And Backstop has been one of those tools that we have now played around a little bit and also tried to integrate it to some of our projects. So in the session today, I will try to give this kind of introduction to what BackstopJS is, how you can install it, how you can set it up, and how you can use it. I will do this kind of theoretical part, and later on Meelis will try to do this kind of hands-on demo where we take one Drupal 8 site and do some testing on it with backstop.js. Since backstop.js is quite easy to get started with and configure, we should be like, during our demo, be able to set it up, define the test scenarios, and run those test scenarios also, and showcase you how the results look like, how does the reporting look like, and so on. So backstop.js, it's actually a tool that is written in Node.js or JavaScript. You can get it via the npm packet manager. It works with Drupal 8. It works with other platforms actually. So it's a platform agnostic. It has no special relationship with Drupal or any other platform. It makes, during the testing, it just makes HTTP requests to the site you are testing. So the actual site or the platform can be anything you wish. And how does Backstop then actually do this testing? So internally, it uses a headless browser. You define the pages in your configuration that Backstop would need to visit, and it renders the pages and creates screenshots out of those pages. And actually, it visits two sets of pages. One set is your reference site. So this is, let's say, your production site, where you know that everything is, all the visuals are correct, and you can use this as a reference or the source of truth, that in this version, everything is correct. You let the Backstop index that site and create all these different screenshots of your site. And then you do your test or crawl your other site, which is your development site, and usually the one that you want to compare with a reference and see what kind of differences are between these versions and where may be different problems. Once Backstop crawls these two versions, it generates this kind of very convenient browser-based or HTML report, and in this report you can see all these different URLs that Backstop has visited. You can see how does the reference version look like. You can see how the test version looks like, and it also showcases this kind of differences for you, this kind of visual diff, if you may. And this is the third column in this slide. And actually, if you see more down there, there are this kind of purple area which showcases actually where these differences between these versions actually exist. And you can open up each of those screenshots also in more detail. You can look at the reference version. You can look at the test version and scrub through them and easily and visually see all the differences you have between these two versions of your site. So later during the demo, we can probably also see it interactively as well. So as a next chapter, maybe I will go through some of the different configuration options and show you how you can tweak this kind of test scenarios and how you can manage your test cases, and what kind of options do you have there. So when you don't specify any additional configuration, Backstop just takes the screenshot of your entire page, just renders everything and takes the screenshot. It can do this using different rendering engines. You can use or the headless browser. You can use Chrome, which is also a default, but you can also use the Firefox rendering engine or Gecko, namely. You can also very conveniently define different viewports. So as Backstop goes on and makes screenshot of your different pages, it can actually automatically make those screenshots from different viewport sizes. So you can at once make screenshot of your desktop version, your mobile version, your tablet version, and you don't need to put any effort into that. You can also specify, if you don't want to test the whole page, you can very easily specify the different areas of the page out of which we actually take the screenshot. And this you can do very easily with CSS selectors, basically. So like every developer is already familiar with CSS selectors, so it's fairly easy to define this kind of areas of the page where we take this screenshot. So in this example, we have some kind of listing. So we can only make a screenshot out of the first block, or we can also configure it that way that it only takes screenshot of these different blocks, not only one. You can also hide and remove stuff. So again, comparing to these two examples, prior to taking this screenshot, you can remove different stuff from the web page. So if you use Backstop, you most probably run into different these kind of issues that you have some external content in your website. You may have some iframes. You have some elements that pull information from other data sources, or like randomize this data. So every time you visit the page, it's the outcome is random. So this is also a tool that you can use to like exclude parts of the page in your screenshot and keep only the relevant parts that you want to test. You can also very easily define these rules that allow you to test different UI states. For like you can, again, prior to taking this screenshot, you can ask this headless browser to basically hover over link, and you can test if your this kind of hover states also behave correctly or not. And if you want to have more control over this headless browser, you have also a possibility to write custom scripts that alter the page or do any kind of actions on the page prior to taking the screenshot. So in this example, I have created a small script where I have written something in the search box, for example. And this may be again useful in this kind of more complex scenarios. Maybe you have some kind of drop-down element in your web page, and you want that this would be also the part of the test. So you can everything that you can script in the browser, this you can also have in your tests as well. And there are three different like libraries or tools that you can use. In that case, there's a Puppeteer, Chromie.js, and Casper.js that handles this internally. So next up, maybe I will go through this kind of workflows and how you could actually use this tool and how you could perform this testing. So if you set up Backstop and want to like trial it or test it in one website, actually all that you need is your local development environment. You don't need to do the testing in more complex scenarios to begin with. You can, for example, take your local environment, check out the master branch, for example, or the source of truth, and use that one as a reference site, or the reference version. Then you could check out your development patch, do any kind of changes, and run the test on that, and that would then compare in your local environment the site as it renders in your master branch to the site as it renders in your development branch. So it's this kind of convenient way to see if you make any kind of CSS changes, for example, do they have expected effects, or do they have this kind of unexpected effects as well? You can use also backstop across separate environments. In this scenario, you could, for example, use the production environment as the reference or the source of truth. And you could use your local environment to compare changes to the production environment. In this case, it's when you start using these different environments, you need to keep in mind that usually across your different environments, your configuration and your content is different. So if you try to run these tests without any kind of configuration or syncing of the configuration and content, you see a lot of errors, and these are because you are testing different sites and your content and configuration is indeed different. So if you use that workflow, then and you need to change your workflow in a manner that prior to testing you sync your content and you sync your configuration between these two environments, and then you can test your sites reliably. Or if there are some parts of the page that really are difficult to handle, you can use these tools that the backstop provides you to hide something, parts of the element that you can exclude those from testing as well. And again, backstop can be also used can be automated, it can be used in your continuous integration pipeline. It creates this kind of HTML or browser-based report, but it can also create you an XML-based report, so which is machine readable, and you can use that, automate on that pretty easily. So how to set it up in your environment? First, you just run npm install and install backstop globally in your computer. And the first thing that you run would be backstop init. What it does, it creates this kind of boilerplate or default configuration file for you named backstop.json. And it also creates one folder which is named backstop data. And this is the folder where it actually stores all these kind of screenshots or bitmap when you do the testing. There's also a separate folder for your scripts. So if you want to really customize the user interface actions, and then all these scripts that you make will need to be put in this engine scripts folder. And the HTML report folder is actually where it generates this HTML or browser-based report that you can then browse and see in your browser. So once you open up this default configuration file that it has generated, so you can one of the most, let's say, important parts that you can configure there and tweak and customize So one of them is the same viewports. With this, you define these different viewports that you want to test with. It's just width and height of the different screen sizes, and you can basically have as many as you want with as many and different configurations as you want. The next thing are these scenarios. So in each scenario, there's a different URL. So for each scenario, Backstop then makes one screenshot of your page. So in your minimal configuration, you don't need to specify anything more than the label and the URL to visit. And for this scenario, Backstop would then would visit your Drupal site .local environment and make this kind of bitmap screenshot out of that. When you use different environments, then you can additionally specify this reference URL. And for example, that can be then your URL that directs to your live environment. And you compare that to the version to your local environment, which would be the regular URL variable. In addition, you can specify then different rules. I will not go into detail, but only highlight some of those. If you have used this backstop init command, actually you can already see a lot of different kind of options that you can use there. But this hide selectors and remove selectors is related to this possibility of hiding or removing different parts of the page. So in your configuration, again, you don't need to specify more than some regular CSS selectors to do that. There is also a separate project actually that is called backstop crawl. So if usually what you want to do is think through what kind of use cases you want to have in your project and specify all these URLs manually, and even think through what kind of elements should be tested on the page. But in the example, if you want to get running quickly, you have some kind of like a brochure site. You can use this tool called backstop crawl that actually crawls through the site and generates all these scenarios automatically for you. So it's a very convenient, easy way to test Bootstrap backstop out and see how it actually works. If you have all this configuration place, then the next thing is to actually run these different tests. So let's go over some of the different steps you need to make. So the first, when you want to test your site or perform testing, so the first command you need to execute is backstop reference. What it does is it takes your configuration, looks what you have, what kind of URL have you specified as the reference, and goes and crawls through that site, renders all the pages according to your configuration, and stores the bitmaps in your backstop data folder. These reference bitmaps don't change automatically. They will, if you want to regenerate them, you have to do them manually using the backstop reference command. Once you have created these reference images, then you use the backstop test command to go through your test environment or the environment you want to compare the reference to. And this does basically the same thing. It crawls the site, it generates these bitmaps, and stores those in the backstop data folder as well. In addition, it generates this HTML report that you can see in the browser, and during that test actually also calculates this kind of score. Does the are these two versions of the base actually the same? Is this test successful or is this test failed? So there's actually usually the case if you start running this kind of backstop tests, you see that oftentimes there are some very minor differences, this kind of rendering differences between your environments. So basically what the backstop calculates is how many pixels differ between your different screenshots. So and by default, backstop configuration says that if these differences are lower than 0.1%, then the test has passed and your versions are identical. So what we have found is that this is the number you need to tweak maybe a little bit, because there are different, you bump into different things and different things which actually the pages are okay, but there are some this kind of rendering issues, differences between your different environments, and the backstop, the number or this difference is actually quite higher, and then you would need to tweak this kind of mismatch threshold variable. Or if you want to be very strict, you can make this mismatch threshold variable actually to 0 as well. So if there's a 1 pixel difference, the backstop will say that this test has failed, and you can go in manually, check visually what's actually the difference, and see and decide then if you need to do any changes or fixes. So once the test has run, this is the report you see. Again, you can see visually the reference version, the test version, and also the difference. There's also a fourth step. If you use backstop in this kind of testing workflow, let's say you are doing some changes on the site, you do the testing, you see that something is broken, you fix those changes, and let's say you also add some new UI elements to your page. So the last step that you actually do in your testing process is running backstop approve. And what it does is it actually promotes your last testing result as a new reference. So if you have introduced some new elements to your page, later you promote that as a reference and refer to that in your later test. So that's this kind of theoretical introduction to backstop, and we have some time also now to actually see it working. So Meelis will now hook up one Drupal 8 site, and we can go through the entire, not the installation process, but starting from basically the backstop init command, how this actually goes through the developer perspective.
Hello from my side. I tried to do live demo. First step is what did I show you is backstop init, which creates boilerplate. That is.
Yeah, this is actually the more detailed result that you would get when running backstop in this kind of default configuration. And you can see in the scenarios all these different configuration options and variables that you could tweak in your tests. And if you scroll down, you can see also there are options like the engine. If you don't want to change the engine, for example, we have found that we have changed it to Chromie because of speed issues, right? So we have found that in our testing, this Chromie behaves or acts a little bit faster. It still uses the Chrome engine, but it's running faster for us.
And now I try to show how we can crawl whole site. Backstop crawler.
Yeah. So what we have underneath is actually this standard Drupal 8 Umami installation, and we execute the crawler on this Umami installation now. It goes in and crawls the site. It's completed, right?
Yes.
So it took about 10 seconds. It visited the site and now generated this backstop.json configuration file now automatically. And so you can see that there should be in this file a lot of different scenarios now. So for every page that the crawler found, it now generates this kind of scenario already automatically. You see that the configuration is now a little bit more extended. You can see that it tries to be smart enough to exclude all these iframe elements from your tests, for example. And also the crawler actually, in his configuration, only generates one viewport. So if we want to have more, we can also go in and specify multiple different viewports. Then we will, for the demonstration purposes, actually, the crawler has found a lot of different pages. So if we would perform testing on that, it would like take more than a minute or so, or several minutes. So just now delete some of these pages and leave only some, and then perform the next one is the reference, right? So we create the reference only for some of these pages. So now we executed the backstop reference command. So we're using the configuration file that the backstop crawl generated. It now goes through the site again and creates different screenshots. You can see, don't see any reports at this stage, but if we would visit this backstop data folder, then we would see that there's all these bitmaps have been generated and stored now to the backstop data folder. And the next step would be test. Did you apply some changes as well, right? No, not that. Okay. At this point, we just execute backstop test directly after the reference. So we haven't made any changes to the site. So what is the expected results that actually all tests should pass now? Because the reference and the test site is actually the same. And it seems it's actually the case that we have 8 different tests and results, and all tests have passed as expected. So if you can see all is green. There is no difference at the moment because they are the same. In that case, you don't see the differences. But if you open up one of those pictures, then you can see that the screenshot as a larger image as well, pretty easily. So let's just implement some changes and do now the test again. So we now should see some failures also. What we are trying to do, just checking out the different branch and which does create some code changes for us. And now we just rerun the test again. and it takes a couple of seconds, not very long. And it's starting to generate the report. So now we have 2 tests that have failed. So we have introduced some changes to our site, and so the screenshots now are different from the reference that we created earlier. So you can let's try to see what these differences actually are. Meelis, can you comment what kind of changes were in the code?
I change color hash1 title.
Okay, you changed the color of the H1 title, right?
Yes.
So yeah, and the good thing about Backstop, it's like oftentimes you have this kind of very minor or slight changes that may be even very difficult to like see visually. Maybe the color change wasn't that obvious, but or your like paddings changed 1 or 2 pixels, so it's very difficult to like see this visually. But using Backstop, it gets your test is already read in this kind of cases. And this kind of HTML report or browser report is very visual, very convenient to use. As you can see, Meelis can scrub left to right and see the left one is the reference version, and once you like move over, you can see visually in the purple color all the differences you have. So actually, I think you even change something more than the H1 color only.
And different viewports. Yes, yeah. Mobile too.
Yeah, here you can see the same thing. All for every different viewport that we had in our configuration, there's not much for us to do. You already have automatically screenshot for all these different viewport sizes. And so this is the HTML report. This is basically it. So to sum up, we haven't ourselves used Backstop very extensively, but we find that actually it's a very this kind of easy to use tool. It's very easy to get started with. To think about different like use cases and scenarios where you could use Backstop. One would be like applying Drupal security updates. So if you have this kind of Drupal site with no other test coverage, for example, but it has this kind of complex logic and functionality. What you could basically do is take your site, make this kind of reference images prior to applying security updates. Then you apply the security updates, make the test, and see if there are any visual differences. So you don't, even if you don't have any this kind of large test base, you can be like easily aware if there are some like breaking changes in the security update that you have made. So that's pretty much it. If anyone has questions, we can try to answer those. And run with the mic.
What about dynamic page where data changes depending on the action, depending on the time, and this kind of situation?
Meelis, can you answer?
It takes screenshot difference. Wait a minute. Yes. Okay, but you can compare videos or animation. But two eks
So I think this is the case with this kind of you need to synchronize the configuration and content when you test different environments, or somehow achieve this kind of situation where this not like affect your test. If you can synchronize your content and configuration, you should do that prior to testing. If you cannot, then you have the option also to like remove some elements of the page prior to testing.
How much time will it take before you add your process to test look at this average page?
It doesn't take very much time. It's like only a few minutes to do these tests on a smaller site. But if you have one big site, then you must think what you want tests, what use case you are important, what you test, what you need test.
Yeah. If you like decide to like use Backstop like on ongoing basis and integrate that to your testing workflow, then I would say that it makes sense to like also invest time to flesh out these different test scenarios. So just this kind of Backstop role is like more like a convenience tool. But if you do the testing either manually or you have some kind of automated testing setup, then I think you want to like make this kind of sensible scenarios that like so you have different areas of the page. You don't take some screenshot from the full page, maybe only select some elements. You have some elements where you test the hover states and things. And also maybe if you have this kind of dynamic parts of the page like drop downs and so on, you have some specifics like scripts that you can also include those to the test as well. But thank you.